She looked at the woman standing in the driveway and saw a problem. She saw a black face, a moving truck, and a house that didn't belong to her. What property manager Danielle Rousseau didn't see was the Victoria Cross citation folded in the woman's jacket pocket. She didn't see the 31 years of service, the rank of lieutenant colonel, or the fact that she was about to pick a fight with someone who had survived 2 tours in Kandahar and 1 in Mali without losing her composure once. Danielle Rousseau thought she was protecting the neighborhood. She was about to learn she was dismantling her own life, brick by brick, with her own hands. The house at 14 Birchwood Crescent in Westmount-sur-Lac was everything the brochure promised. A restored century home with slate-grey shutters, a wraparound porch, and a backyard that sloped gently toward a stand of white birch trees that turned gold every October. The kind of house that gets passed down or bought once and never left. Lieutenant Colonel Amara Oseboteng had purchased it outright, no mortgage, no co-signer, no negotiation. She had wired the full amount from her account on a Tuesday morning and received the keys by Friday afternoon. It was a warm Saturday in early September when the moving truck arrived. Amara stood beside it in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain white t-shirt, a light canvas jacket. At 51, she carried herself with the kind of economy of movement that comes from decades of knowing that wasted energy costs lives. Her hair was natural, cropped close. She wore no jewelry except a single watch on her left wrist, military issue, that had survived things no watch was designed to survive. She wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't directing the movers with exaggerated gestures. She was simply standing on the driveway of her house, watching 2 men carry furniture through the front door, holding a coffee from the Tim Hortons 4 blocks away. That was when Danielle Rousseau appeared. Rousseau was the property manager for the Birchwood Crescent Residential Association, a position that sounded more official than it was. She managed maintenance requests, collected fees for the private road upkeep, and distributed the seasonal parking notices. It was a volunteer role with a business card, which in Rousseau's interpretation meant authority without accountability. She was 54, with highlighted hair that hadn't changed since 2009, and a lanyard around her neck that held a laminated ID card she had printed herself. She crossed the street with the energy of a person who had been waiting for an excuse. "Excuse me," Rousseau said, stopping at the edge of the driveway. She didn't say hello. She didn't introduce herself. "Is the owner aware that you're here?" Amara turned slowly. She looked at the woman. She took a sip of her coffee. "I'm sorry," Amara said. "The owner of this property," Rousseau repeated, speaking with the careful emphasis of someone who believed they were being very clear. "Are they aware that a moving truck is parked here? This is a private road and we have regulations." "I own this property," Amara said simply. Rousseau blinked. Something shifted in her face, not embarrassment but recalibration. She had a response prepared for that answer, and it was already loading. "That's not possible," So said. "The Hendersons sold this house through Colliers. I was CC'd on the association notices. The buyer was listed as A. Oseboteng." "That's me," Amara said. Another pause. Rousseau looked at the truck. She looked at the 2 movers. She looked back at Amara. "Do you have documentation?" Rousseau asked. "Proof of purchase?" "The association requires notification of new residents within 48 hours of possession. We have a welcome package and a vetting process." Amara set her coffee down on the porch railing behind her. She did it slowly, the way a person sets something down when they're deciding whether to pick it back up again. "A vetting process," Amara repeated. "It's standard procedure," Rousseau said, holding up her laminated card as though that explained everything. "We need to verify residents for security purposes." "There have been incidents." "What kind of incidents?" Amara asked. Rousseau gestured vaguely at the street. "Arclight vehicles. People who don't belong." The 2 movers had paused on the porch. One of them, a young man in his 20s with a Habs cap, was watching the exchange with a look that said he had seen this before and knew exactly what it was. Amara looked at Rousseau for a long moment. She did not raise her voice. She did not shift her weight. She had stood in front of far more dangerous people than Danielle Rousseau and never blinked. Amara began. "Rousseau. Danielle Rousseau, Birchwood Residential Association." "Ems Rousseau," Amara said. "I purchased this home. I have the title deed, the certificate of possession, the land transfer confirmation, and the keys which I used this morning to unlock the door that you're standing in front of. I don't know what your association's welcome package includes, but I'm going to ask you to step off my driveway." Rousseau's expression tightened. She had expected compliance or confusion. She had not expected calm precision. "I understand you may have documentation," Rousseau said, with the tone of someone who did not understand that at all. "But until the association has reviewed and approved," "Reviewed," Amara said. "And approved. It's a formality. It's a filter," Amara said. Her voice had dropped half an octave. Not loud. Quieter, actually. "And I think you know that, Ms. Rousseau." Rousseau straightened. "I'm going to have to ask the movers to stop until this is sorted." The young man in the Habs cap put down the box he was holding. He crossed his arms and looked at Rousseau with the unambiguous expression of a man who was not going to stop doing his job because a woman with a printed lanyard told him to. "You can ask," he said. Rousseau pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the association president." "Go ahead," Amara said. She picked up her coffee. What Rousseau did not know, what she could not have known from the vantage point of her own certainty, was that while she stood in the driveway scrolling to find the association president's number, Amara Osei Boateng was doing her own quiet calculation. She had not moved to Westmount-sur-Lac for the house alone. She had moved here to be close to CFB Montreal, where she was taking on a new role as a senior advisor to the Regional Joint Task Force. She had clearance that most people in this country did not know existed. She had, in the left pocket of her canvas jacket, a letter from the Minister of National Defense congratulating her on 31 years of service and welcoming her to the next chapter. She had also, in 31 years of dealing with difficult situations in difficult places, learned exactly when to let a situation unfold on its own. She let it unfold. Rousseau reached the association president, a man named T. Kowalczyk, and began explaining in rapid, clipped sentences that there was an issue at the Henderson property. Her voice carried. The young mover in the Habs cap caught Amara's eye. She gave him a single, small nod. He picked up the box again and carried it inside. The conversation on Rousseau's phone lasted 4 minutes. Amara could hear, faintly, that the tone on the other end was not what Rousseau had expected. When she hung up, her face had rearranged itself into something that looked like confusion pretending to be composure. "He says the sale was registered last week," Rousseau said. "Yes," Amara said. "He says the association was notified through the standard title transfer." "Yes," Amara said again. Rousseau looked at the house. She looked at Amara. Something in her face was trying to find a new angle, a new position that didn't require admitting what the last 10 minutes had been. "Well," she said, "there are still the parking regulations to discuss. The moving truck is blocking. It'll be gone in 2 hours," Amara said. "You're welcome to come back then." She turned and walked up the porch steps and into her house. Rousseau stood on the driveway alone for a moment, then she left. It should have ended there. It would have ended there, with most people. But Danielle Rousseau was not capable of leaving something alone that she felt she had not finished. By Monday morning, she had sent 3 emails to the association board. The subject lines used words like concern, transparency, and due diligence. By Wednesday, she had spoken to 2 neighbors, both of whom later said they had not agreed with anything she said and had told her so. By Friday, she had filed a formal complaint with the association, alleging that the title transfer had not followed proper notification protocol and requesting a review of the sale. It was the complaint that changed things. Because when Amara Osei Boateng received the formal notice in her mailbox, a printed letter in an envelope with the Birchwood Residential Association logo, also printed, she sat down at a kitchen table, read it twice, and made a phone call. Not to the association, not to a lawyer, not yet. She called Major Pauline Ferraro Osei, her former staff officer, and one of the sharpest minds she had encountered in 3 decades of service, who had left the Canadian Armed Forces the previous year to complete her law degree at McGill. Ferraro Osei was 3 weeks from her call to the bar. "Tell me what it says," Ferraro Osei said. Amara read the letter aloud. There was a silence on the line, then the sound of typing. She filed it under protocol review. Ferraro Osei said, "That's not nothing. That's a paper trail. Do you know if any of this happened to the previous owners? Or the ones before them?" "I don't," Amara said. "I do," Ferraro Osei said. "Or I will by tomorrow morning." By tomorrow morning, Ferraro Osei had pulled the association records going back 11 years. In that time, 14 properties on Birchwood Crescent had changed hands. 13 of those sales had triggered no formal complaints, no protocol reviews, no vetting process requests. The one exception was a family named Adeyemi Kalibali, who had purchased a property in 2019 and received 2 letters from the association in their first month of residence. They had moved out within the year. Ferraro Osei sent the records to Amara with a single message. "This is a pattern. Do you want to proceed?" Amara looked at the records for a long time. She thought about the Adeyemi Kalibali family. She thought about the word incidents and the gesture Rousseau had made toward the street. She thought about the young man in the Habs cap, who had just picked up his box and kept moving. She wrote back, "Proceed." What happened next was not loud. That was the thing people would later remark on. The ones who followed the story, as it moved from a neighborhood complaint to a provincial human rights filing to a national post piece that ran on a Thursday and trended on social media until Sunday. None of it was loud. It was methodical. It was documented. It was the way Lieutenant Colonel Amara Osei Boateng had run every operation she had ever commanded. And it was the way she dismantled Danielle Rousseau's position, piece by piece. Ferraro Osei filed a formal complaint with the Quebec Human Rights Commission on the grounds of discriminatory conduct in the context of residential property access, citing the pattern of selective enforcement, the targeted complaint, and 2 witnesses, both neighbors Rousseau had approached, who provided written statements confirming that Rousseau had made comments about the neighborhood's character and the importance of ensuring the right kind of resident. Those words, the right kind. The association board, upon being officially notified of the commission filing, held an emergency meeting. The minutes of that meeting, obtained later, showed that the first motion passed unanimously was the removal of Danielle Rousseau from her position as property manager. The second motion was a formal apology letter to Lieutenant Colonel Osei Boateng. The third was the hiring of an external equity auditor to review the association's practices going back a decade. Rousseau received the news by text from the association president at 6:47 in the evening. She called back immediately. Kowalczyk did not answer. She tried the vice president. No answer. She tried 2 board members she had known for years, people she had had Christmas dinners with, whose children had played hockey with her son. One of them picked up and said, quietly and carefully, that he was sorry, but the board couldn't be seen to be. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The story, once it ran in the National Post, did not run the way Rousseau might have hoped. The journalist had done thorough work. She had the commission filing, the association records, the neighbor statements. She had a quote from Major Ferraro Osei. "This is a textbook case of systemic exclusion dressed up as, our client purchased her home legally and transparently. What she encountered was not procedure. It was obstruction." She had also confirmation of Amara's identity and service record, released with Amara's permission by DND's Public Affairs Office. The piece included Amara's rank, her decorations, her deployment history, and a photograph taken at Rideau Hall in 2018 when she had received her commendation from the Governor General. The headline did not use the word racist. It didn't need to. Rousseau's name was in the piece. So was the name of her employer. She worked as a client relations coordinator at a regional insurance brokerage in Laval. By Friday afternoon, her employer had placed her on administrative leave, pending an internal review. By the following Tuesday, she had resigned. Her husband, a quiet man who coached minor hockey and had no involvement in any of it, filed for separation 4 weeks later. He had not, he told a mutual friend, been able to look at her the same way since the neighbors' statements were published. The statements described conversations he had not floppen had happened, using language he had not known she used. Her son was in his 2nd year at Concordia. He did not come home for Thanksgiving. Rousseau spent those weeks in a house that felt like it was contracting around her. The news vans were never as dramatic as she might have imagined, maybe 2 vehicles parked on the street for a single afternoon. But the online version of a situation had no edges. It didn't go away when she closed the laptop. It was there in the morning, in the search results, in the comment sections, in the emails she could not stop reading, even though every single one of them made it worse. She had called the association president a dozen times. She had called the board. She had called her union rep, before remembering she wasn't in a union. She had called a lawyer, who told her that the commission process was civil, not criminal, but that her exposure in terms of the parallel civil claim being considered by Lieutenant Colonel Osei Boateng's legal team was real. The word sat in the middle of her kitchen like a piece of furniture she kept walking into. She had not expected this. She had expected to protect something. She had expected the structures she believed in, the association, the board, the quiet agreement of people who understood each other, to hold. They had not held. They had, the moment real pressure was applied, folded like paper. The Human Rights Commission proceeding concluded 8 months later. Rousseau had retained counsel by then, a reasonable man who advised her to settle. She settled. The terms were not made entirely public, but the Commission's summary finding noted a violation under the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms on the basis of race and ordered remediation, including a financial settlement and a requirement that Rousseau complete a supervised equity training program. Her lawyer drove her home after the proceeding. He didn't say much. What was there to say? On the same day the Commission issued its findings, Lieutenant Colonel Amara Osi-Boateng was in her backyard on Birchwood Crescent, raking leaves. The white birch trees had gone gold, exactly as advertised. Her daughter was visiting from Ottawa, sitting on the porch steps with a mug of coffee, telling her about a promotion she was considering. Inside the house, which smelled of cedar and garlic, and the apple pie currently in the oven, everything was where it belonged. Major Ferraro Ose had called that morning with the news of the Commission's finding. Amara had listened, thanked her, and gone back to making pie crust. Not because she didn't care, because she had known since the day she filed the complaint how it would end. She had not spent 31 years reading situations to be surprised by the conclusion of this one. She had not kept the case in the papers for herself. She had kept it there for the Adeyemi Coulibaly family, who had moved away from a house they loved because no one had made the call, and for the families who hadn't moved yet, the ones who would come after her, who would park a moving truck on a private road on a Saturday morning and wonder if the person walking toward them was going to ask them a question or welcome them home. The backyard was quiet. The leaves came down in slow, unhurried spirals. Her daughter called out something about dinner, and Amara looked up at the sky. That deep Canadian autumn blue that you don't forget once you've seen it, and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely at rest. Danielle Rousseau had crossed a driveway to decide who belonged. She had found out that the only person she'd displaced was herself. There's a version of this story where Amara Osi-Boateng is just a woman trying to move into her house, and that version is also true. The fact that she was a lieutenant colonel with 31 years of service and a commendation from the Governor-General. That didn't make her more deserving of dignity. It just made the outcome undeniable. The real question, the one worth sitting with, is what happens to the people without the service record, without the McGill-trained lawyer one call away, without the paper trail that holds. Because Danielle Rousseau didn't invent this on a Saturday morning. She had practiced it, quietly, for years, in a neighborhood where no one had pushed back before. If this story made you feel something, let us know in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to see that dignity defended is never wasted. And if you believe that belonging should never have to be earned by credentials, subscribe to Voices of Courage, because that's exactly what we're here for.